Picture New York in the late 1920s. Streetlights glare off chrome bumpers, radios glow in living rooms, factories hum. The future feels inevitably like America has finally cracked the code of prosperity. And on Wall Street, the numbers seem to agree. Stock prices rise, then rise again, until the market starts to feel less like a place where value is discovered, and more like a machine that only moves in one direction. Up. The Roaring Twenties weren't just roaring with jazz, they were roaring with certainty. And certainty is dangerous because it invites complacency. The most seductive myth of a long bull market is simple. This time is different, that the rules of gravity have been repealed, that the boom has matured into permanence. Even the famous economist Irving Fisher captured the mood when he proclaimed that stock prices had reached what looked like a permanently high plateau. That phrase didn't just describe the market, it gave people permission to stop being afraid. Part 1. The Roaring Twenties. Real progress, unreal confidence. To be fair, the 1920s were not pure fantasy. Innovation was real, consumer life was changing fast, and the stock market reflected that optimism. But the market also became a social phenomenon. Participation wasn't limited to bankers and industrialists anymore. People from across society rushed in. Britannica describes a public surge to brokers that included everyone from banking and industrial magnates to chauffeurs and cooks. When a market becomes a cultural movement, skepticism starts to sound like heresy. Now here's where the myth begins. In a long bull run, past gains start to feel like proof of future safety. People don't say I'm taking risk, they say I'm being smart, and that shift when risk becomes invisible is how bubbles grow without needing anyone to announce them. Part 2. The fuel. Easy credit and buying on margin. The boom wasn't powered only by optimism. It was powered by credit, especially the practice of buying on margin. The Federal Reserve's history account describes how ordinary investors could buy equities with borrowed funds, often putting down only a fraction of the price, typically 10%, and borrowing the rest, with the purchased stock used as collateral. In other words, you didn't need full money to buy stocks, you needed confidence. History.com echoes this dynamic. Some investors paid only a small percentage and borrowed the rest from a bank or broker, making stock ownership feel excessively and deceptively easy. This is the core mechanic of leverage. When prices rise, debt feels harmless. When prices fall, debt becomes a trap, because leverage doesn't just magnify gains, it forces decisions at the worst time. And in the late 1920s, borrowed money poured into markets, helping push prices higher and higher. It didn't feel like fragility, it felt like momentum. Part 3. The warning signs. Ignored, mocked, or explained away. Not everyone was blind. Skeptics existed, including inside the Federal Reserve System. Many leaders believed speculation was diverting resources away from productive uses like industry and commerce. The Federal Reserve Board even argued that the system wasn't meant to extend speculative credit, so the Fed tried to respond. But here's the catch. Central banks don't have a bubble button. They have blunt instruments: interest rates, credit conditions, moral suasion. The Fed debated whether to restrict credit directly or raise the discount rate. Eventually, New York's discount rate rose, reaching 6% in August 1929, and that tightening mattered beyond the market. Higher rates squeezed spending on cars, homes, and business expansion areas that depend on credit. Britannica's Great Depression analysis notes that tight monetary policy aimed at limiting speculation helped depress interest-sensitive spending, contributing to economic weakness even before the crash fully hit. Even worse, under the international gold standard, American rate hikes pressured other central banks to raise rates, too, exporting tight money abroad and helping push the global economy toward recession. So by late 1929, the system was already more brittle than most people realized. The party music was still playing, but the floorboards were creaking. Part 4. The turning point. When confidence breaks, bubbles don't end when people discover the truth. They end when people stop believing the story. In September 1929, prices began to wobble. A little decline here, a recovery there, the kind of volatility people dismiss as healthy. But late bubble markets have a hidden dependency. They require continuous confidence. They require buyers who believe tomorrow will be higher than today. Once doubt appears, the most dangerous chain reaction begins. The margin call spiral. Britannica explains that many stocks had been purchased on margin using loans secured by only a small fraction of the stock's value. So when prices fell, investors were forced to liquidate, worsening the decline. This is the nightmare math of leverage. Prices fall gives collateral shrinks, gives lenders demand cash, gives forced selling, gives prices fall more. It's not just fear, it's mechanics. Part 5. October 1929. The crash becomes a stampede. Then came October. Britannica describes the first real day of panic: Black Thursday, October 24th, when a record number of shares traded as investors rushed to salvage what they could. After temporary efforts to stabilize prices, panic returned. Black Monday and Black Tuesday followed with devastating declines and enormous volume. The Federal Reserve History essay lays out just how epic the boom and collapse were. The Dow rose sixfold from 1921 to its 1929 peak, then plunged, falling dramatically through 1932, when it hit a low far below the peak. and not returning to pre-crash highs until decades later. Visual sources you can use while narrating from the sources above. A Dow Jones chart, 1920 to 1954, appears inside the Federal Reserve History article, showing the 1929 peak, the 1932 low, and the long road back. A photo of a crowd outside the New York Stock Exchange after the crash is also embedded in that same Federal Reserve History page. Those visuals are perfect because they communicate something a statistic can't: the mood shift from certainty to shock. Part 6: Why the Crash Mattered. Psychology, Spending, and the Real Economy. A stock market crash can be terrifying, but by itself, it doesn't automatically become a decade-long depression. What matters is what the crash does to behavior. Britannica's Great Depression analysis explains that after the crash, consumer purchases of durable goods and business investment fell sharply. A major reason was uncertainty. People didn't know what their incomes would be, so they postponed big decisions. Even if the direct wealth loss was limited for many households, the crash made people feel poorer and more cautious. The Federal Reserve History essay similarly notes that fear and uncertainty reduced big-ticket purchases, especially those bought with credit-leading firms to cut production and lay off workers, deepening the contraction already underway. So the crash didn't just erase paper wealth, it damaged the future because the economy runs on expectations as much as it runs on cash. Part 7: From Crash to Great Depression. The financial system breaks by late 1929 and into the early 1930s. What could have been a shorter recession became something far worse. Britannica explains that a series of banking panics hit, and the money supply fell dramatically, down 31% between 1929 and 1933 as people hoarded cash and the banking system contracted. That contraction depressed spending, encouraged deflation expectations, and made borrowing unattractive even when nominal rates were low. The Federal Reserve History overview of the Great Depression also emphasizes that the Fed's failure to act effectively as lender of last resort during the banking panics was central to the catastrophe, and that policy mistakes contributed to the length and depth of the depression. This is where the story becomes bigger than Wall Street. The crash was the spark. The banking failures and monetary contraction were the fire that spread into every city and farm and household. Part 8: The Real Theme, Complacency in Long Bull Markets. Now zoom out, because your video isn't only about 1929, it's about a pattern. A long bull market doesn't just raise prices, it reshapes beliefs. It trains people to treat risk as normal. It turns leverage into efficiency. It makes skepticism look outdated. It convinces smart people that they're safe because they're surrounded by agreement. And the most dangerous part is how gradually it happens. Nobody wakes up and says, "Today I will become complacent." Complacency arrives as comfort, as routine, as a sense that the floor beneath you is solid because it has been solid for so long. The Roaring Twenties did include genuine progress, but the myth was the idea of eternal prosperity, the belief that modernity itself had eliminated cycles, crashes, and consequences. 1929 proved the opposite. Closing takeaway: the lesson of the Roaring Twenties isn't that optimism is bad, it's that optimism unchecked can become a system-wide vulnerability. Because when everyone believes the same happy story, the market doesn't just rise together. It can fall together fast, violently, and with ripple effects that reach far beyond the trading floor. The crash of 1929 wasn't simply a bad week on Wall Street. It was the moment a nation discovered that confidence, like credit, can vanish on demand. And when it does, the myth of permanent prosperity doesn't fade gently, it collapses.